Hello and welcome to the Oasis Appreciation Podcast. It's Sam Bruce and Christy Doran in the Gallagher Garage. Christy, what a concert.
How good was the concert? I know our producer, Laurie Horesh, was there. He was probably a bit closer to the action than I was, but serious Manchester vibes, but a lot of fun.
A lot of fun. My social media, I'm sure it was the same. Everyone was absolutely lit up by people who were out there. Looked incredible. I wasn't there personally. I probably had enough of people telling me how good it was by sort of middle of Saturday night. And then things, Christy, got worse from there because I had to get up and watch a game of rugby, which I'd rather just forget about completely.
And you got more Oasis on Sunday.
It kept coming.
It did, didn't it? Yeah, it's good to have a laugh. Look, we were here a week ago and we were talking about how close this game was going to be, how much it wasn't just a banana peel game. This was a game that was seriously in the balance here, and it was important that the Wallabies won. I wrote a week ago that this would be the test to prove whether or not Joe Schmidt is worth his salt. And I've got to say, I'm not surprised that the Wallabies lost because they were found wanting in most areas of the game. And I think it shocked a lot of people, the public particularly, because people going, well, how have you gone from beating the Lions in the third test, shocking the Springboks at Ellis Park, to pushing the All Blacks, to scraping over the line against Japan and now losing to Italy? It's been a downward slope for some time.
Yeah, you think about it, there's probably a few people who went to Oasis Saturday night, didn't get up at the 4:40 kickoff like I know you did. I was about half an hour behind because I'm having some major dramas with Stan and my Samsung television. But to borrow, a bit of Live Forever, it was maybe how'd the Wallabies go? I don't really want to know.
Wow, you've spent a bit of time.
Oh, mate, yeah, that's a hello to Tommy Hilliard. I'm not going to sing you the other verse I wrote there because I'm not a singer and I'm not going to embarrass myself. But it was an embarrassing outing for Australia in Udine. Italy fully deserving of their win. And, it was interesting listening to James Slipper there and the Stan Sport post-game, and he summed it up basically, straight away. We were beaten to the ball. We were beaten to the breakdown, words to that effect. And, that is the oldest adage in rugby, a bit like if you don't win your set piece, you don't win the contest on the ground, you're not going to win a game of rugby. And the Wallabies, they weren't even second best there. They weren't anywhere where they need to be at test level, let alone Italy, who are ranked, number 10 in the world. They absolutely dominated that facet of the game, and the Wallabies were deserved losers.
Yeah, they were. 3 years ago, the Wallabies were shocked. Australian rugby was shocked when the Wallabies lost to Italy in Florence. So I don't think this was a shock at all. And you're quite right. They were beaten to the punch in those areas. The thing that I found fascinating, Andrew Brace was the referee. And 3 years ago, or 2 years ago rather, in St Etienne, he was, I described it at the time, whistle happy. He
was lightning.
Lightning speed with rewarding the Fijians at the breakdown. I think it was Botia that just had an absolute field day on that beautiful afternoon in St Etienne. And he was the same referee man holding the whistle on the weekend. And similarly, Australia got smoked at the breakdown. And they were too slow. Fraser McWright was well rewarded. He had great technique, chose his timing. But there was the signs early on were not great, were they? You had Harry Potter kick out in the full after a minute. Jake Gordon kicked out not that long after. Cardiff Gordon as well, within 2 and a couple of minutes. And then in the second half, it was Joseph Akusaswale kicked out in the fourth. So they've lost possession 4 times there. Gordon was beaten in the air 2 or 3 times. They got the ball back once there. But Monty Ioane climbed over the top of Gordon. He had 2 forward passes from Matt Fesler. So the Wallabies did a great job at turning the ball over, and then they were too slow, like a little dart from Gordon. And then Harry Wilson's way too slow to the breakdown. They get turned over, and you've got to tip your hat to the Italians. They were very good in that area.
They were, and they're a better side, Italy, than they were even a couple of years ago now, 3 years ago when that defeat virtually ended Dave Rennie's career. And, I mean, you've got to tip your hat to them, but at the same time, this is still a nation that Australia should be beating every day of the week. And as you mentioned, it was a terrible start there, a 6-0 lead, a succession of penalties again to start a test match.
It was about 4 and 10 minutes, wasn't it?
It was horrible. And if you go back through their recent games, the Japan game aside, when they gave away only 7, it's sort of 13-13, 14-15, right back to basically that game up in Townsville, which they did manage to win over Argentina. So it's almost back to the bad old days of the Wallabies' ill discipline, which was a hallmark of the finish of the day for any era there. Their inaccuracy at the breakdown. I mean, Brace even gave Harry Wilson a warning, didn't he, on the weekend? He said, Harry, I'll let that one go because there was a player, an Italian, still in the ruck, preventing not rolling away. So it was a bit of a, they offset each other, if you like. But he got a warning there. He clearly wasn't the only guilty party. But, Christy, there is a trend here with Harry Wilson that is unmistakable. And England pointed it out in their dossier, which we discussed on last week's pod. Steve Borthwick's coaching team eventually got leaked to the media. He gave away a number of penalties last week. He's just, we can't look past it anymore. Maybe we're giving him the benefit of the doubt last week, but the trend is there now, and it was spotted by England, and I think every Wallabies fan has woken up to it. I like Harry Wilson as a player. I love how much he loves Australia, the jersey, and everything else, and we've discussed him a lot.
What he stands for is great.
He's great, but I think he probably needs a week off at this point. He was meant to get certainly a fewer minutes against Japan. It didn't happen with the injuries, but it looks tired. Harry Wilson, he's making too many errors and penalties to give away that many in a game 2 weeks running. I think it's probably a time for Harry to have a week off.
It's a tricky one now because it's the last two tests. It's the two of the tests that you go, well, we're going to have Lenny Cattell, we'll hopefully have Will Skelton, James O'Connor, etc. So it was probably the two tests you're going, Australia needs to win one of these two to ensure that the tour is somewhat of success. And do you want to be, leaving out your captain? I think they got the selection wrong to begin with. They should have left out Harry Wilson for the Italian game. And now I think consequently it's going to have to be against Ireland because you can't pick him at the moment. There's way too many penalties. But there's two or three guys that have actually, this whole fatigue excuse that's being, in my opinion, it's wearing thin. But it's being used, it's been trotted out, and there's only two or three of them that probably it relates to. One is Harry Wilson, two would be Nick Frost, three would be Fraser McReight. And Angus Bell's come off the bench for the vast majority of the season. Fraser McReight's in pretty good form, we would have to say. Yep. He's been Australia's best player in the last 2 weeks. Nick Frost was a bit quieter on the weekend, but he shouldered a lot of the work. And Harry Wilson, who, as you rightly pointed out, had to come on after 20 minutes against Japan, he should have been probably given that game off, and he absolutely should have been given game off on the weekend. It would have allowed a better balance of the back row. It would have allowed for Rob Valentini to go to start at 8. We already knew Tom Hooper was there. But you're right. I think the time is now for Harry Wilson to have a week off. The Wallabies get a different picture there. And who that might be for captain, maybe a Fraser McReight, probably an Alatoa, who I suspect will come back against Ireland this week off the back of having last weekend off.
Certainly the status quo can't continue. There needs to be a bit of a circuit breaker somewhere in this Wallabies team. We saw Carter Gordon come in and I think did a pretty fair job in his first game back in certainly 18 months playing rugby. That one moment in the first half where he cut through on the wrap and threw a beautiful pass that hit Corey Toole on the chest, but I think that was the turnover sort of 2 phases later that you were referring to. The support wasn't quick enough, and that was essentially the story of this game, that Italy were on the ball and Australia were that split second too long in between ball carrier and cleaners, and they paid the price ultimately for it. So Carter came off after, I think, 55-ish minutes, hadn't been goal kicking. That's a problem what we discussed at length on this podcast around what comes of that. I don't know that Andrew Kellaway is a natural goal kicker.
Or a natural drop kick restart.
No. So there's, knock-on effects there. James O'Connor Joe said, look, he's available. He may consider bringing him in. But it's this balance now, isn't it, Christy, around, well, are we trying to salvage something from this year, which is shown glimpses of being very good, but is, at the moment trending backwards at a significant rate? Or are we still looking ahead to next year, trying to set Les Kiss up and then extending that out to the World Cup? If it was me, I think, particularly given Carter's quad and the fact that he can't goal kick, I'd be very, very tempted to bring James O'Connor in next week.
I think you'll see Carter Gordon miss next weekend. The fact that he came off after 55 minutes, he was going for a kick with some length in the backfield. he was replaced about a minute or two later, wasn't he? So I think you can't trust a guy to get in. Is he going to therefore be able to go? Like, there's a heavy travel day on the Sunday. Monday is a lighter one with a bit of gym stuff, and then Tuesday is a full day training session. Is he going to be able to get through that? I wouldn't think so. And if that's the case, are you risking him to go again on the Saturday? I would think he's in serious doubt for the game. So you probably are starting Tane Edmund, and then James O'Connor would be on the bench, and you might have to play him for 30 minutes. And it just, I scratch my head, and I have no idea why James O'Connor wasn't in the squad last weekend. We've spoken about it all year. Ben Donaldson was thrown under the bus over the last 6 months. He, from being in the match day 23 to picking up an injury before the game to be left out and to not return since is, he wasn't in great form for the Western Force, but I think for a guy that's played 3 or 4 years, been in and around the team, had some really good cameos off the bench, I think he was harshly treated there. Similarly, Tom Liner was extremely harshly treated. Like, he was there in the stands in the weekend, wasn't he? And I think, isn't it disappointing? Like, he started 3 tests against the Lions, came out and was definitely swimming at the end of it. And where is he? Like, aren't Australia building towards a World Cup? Wouldn't it be better to have a potential number 10, or certainly someone who you're thinking would be in the 23, in and around the squad at the moment?
There's a bit of mixed messaging again, essentially what you're saying, when it comes to the fly halves in particular.
The communication's been woeful all year. So I don't understand. James O'Connor would and wanted to be in the squad. Now, I know that when you only have 2, they get more reps. So maybe that's an issue, that they don't want to have a third guy where they feel like they have to get the reps in there for a training perspective. But I think on so many steps along the way, the Wallabies have been on the back foot here, and it's because of this reactive nature that you just bring someone in when there's an injury, rather than really bulletproofing around the entire squad. So, yeah, I think it's really strange what's occurred. Clearly, he wasn't kicking, and it was maybe because of you not wanting to increase the load too much. But why not Ryan Lonergan start the game? Like, I understand that they want the Jake Gordon experience there, 31 or so, but Ryan Lonergan's played nearly 100 Super Rugby matches, and a 27-year-old who's been a leader and captain of the Brumbies on many occasions, Australia A too. So he's a more than competent goal kicker, can restart, can jump in at 10 if necessary, and you're giving him 3 minutes. So I think right across the board, there are selection mistakes here. There's tactical mistakes here. I think the Wallabies are playing. I think Joe Schmidt's wanting the Wallabies to play how Ireland played 5, 6, 7 years ago, but they don't have the game drivers like they did with Connor Murray, nor Johnny Sexton, and then certainly not a Rob Kearney at the back there, who was just had so much experience. Communication was a British and Irish line back in the day. There's none of that at the moment, and you're trying to play this rapid breakdown speed with a team that's not particularly strong at the breakdown, and it's been a real area of, maybe it's had a bit of improvement over the last 12 months under Schmidt, but it's traditionally not been an area of strength for the Wallabies, has it?
Pete Samu also only got sort of 10 minutes. I think it was right at a stage when the Wallabies, having lost Joseph Okuso Suali'i to the bin for, a poor tackle, and he fully deserved that yellow card. It's been a concern, right from when he first transitioned back to rugby, the big question mark that surrounded him. But they needed to shake things up, and it feels like they've got to do that this week. Really, what's the analogy? Well, I guess just make some bold selections, really. And I wonder if, Carlo Tizzano's been a bit crook. Fraser McWright, let's say, is doing a magnificent job on the defensive side of the ball at the breakdown, proving that he's absolutely world-class in that facet, but probably not getting him a lot on the other side of the ball. He's a wonderful support player, but we don't see that as much in Test rugby because the margins are tighter. The game is tighter than Super Rugby. Carlo probably gives you a little bit more on the carry than Fraser would. We've already spoken about Harry Wilson. Dylan Peach was unwell, I think, alongside Max Jorgensen. I can see you're ready to tee off here as well. There needs to be, as I think I mentioned it earlier, a circuit breaker this week against Ireland, because it was more of the same, basically what we saw. It's even going back to Japan now, and probably that second half in Perth. This has been 4 tests running that the Wallabies look short on energy. You're not buying the fatigue thing. Well, what happens then? We've got to make some different selections because the ones that Australia are putting out at the moment aren't doing the job, and some other guys deserve a crack.
The test on the weekend was like watching with the Waratahs under Darryl Gibson, where the coach was not prepared to back the wider squad. You know, Jake Gordon played 80 minutes against Japan, and we thought that was probably, in hindsight, the right call because they managed to eke out the win. But you can't continue to play someone for 80 minutes and not give confidence and trust in the other night, because in one hand you're saying we're fatigued, and then on the other hand you're not actually using your bench at all. Italy, England got a massive boost from their bench a week earlier because they brought on 4 or 5 guys at the 51.
That was the circuit breaker for them.
It was the circuit breaker. That's not occurring here under Joe Schmidt at the moment. So I don't cop any of the fatigue factor at all, because half the team hasn't played more than 8 test matches this year. And then in addition to that, Joe Schmidt's getting away with a lot because he's saying guys were a little bit unwell, had a little niggle here. Now, Max Jorgensen apparently was a little bit unwell leading to the England game, yet he played the England match and maybe didn't play as well, but he was totally fine for the week of the Italy game, but he's been dropped. Now the excuse that Joe Schmidt's saying that he was a bit unwell, but he was unwell the week earlier, not the week of the Italy game. Carlo Tizzano, I think he's perfectly fine, but I think there's a message from Schmidt that he doesn't like saying that guys have been dropped or left out. And this is the reason. I think there's a lot of skirting around the edges, which doesn't actually give clarity to anyone, and certainly not the public. So, I don't like the messaging from Joe Schmidt whatsoever. And I think that's been probably pretty crystal clear for some time, because I obviously wrote a column back in July, which was
that one again?
Rather pointed. But the communication, I think, has been an issue for a long, long time. In addition to that, the Wallabies coaching staff now is rather inexperienced. You've got Joe Schmidt and Laurie Fisher, very experienced. Who are the guys that have come in? You've lost Mike Cron, and you've replaced him with Johnny Luja, who's second-year Super Rugby coach, but very inexperienced. Only finished up playing less than 2 years ago. Then you've got Jeff Parling, who was a very well-credentialed England international, British and Irish line, who had 5 years of coaching, been in and out of the Wallabies, because you remember in 2020 he was there when Dan McKellar didn't want to jump in immediately. And you've replaced him with Tom Donnelly, who's really only had 1 year of Super Rugby as an assistant coach as well. So you've got Owen Toulon, who's more of an analyst, who's been the skills coach over the last year or two. So it's a bit of a myth now that the coaching structure is experienced. I don't think it is. And maybe we're seeing a little bit play out in the field, because the Wallabies have been predictable and they're being out-coached for quite a few tests in a row now.
Well, they've got to throw certainly something different at Ireland, because, if anyone's going to know the Joe Schmidt game plan, it's Ireland, because they have played it. And, there's even a bit of pressure on the way they're playing at the moment. They had a good win over Japan on the weekend, but certainly not the team that they were back in 2023 and previously. But, I mean, if Australia turn out what they have from an attacking perspective the past few weeks, they're just going to be lambs to the slaughter. Ireland are just going to line up and beat them in a submission, and they'll dominate the breakdown. They've still got a very handy pack of forwards. And it's hard to see, unless, as I keep coming back to, a bit of a circuit breaker this week for Australia, a different approach, a different game plan, some new troops out there, that we're not going to get more of the same in Dublin early Sunday morning.
You're probably right. And the one thing of the schedule I will say, it's favoured Ireland here. They've gone New Zealand and Chicago, tough game first up, to a much easier match against Japan at home in Dublin. They don't have to, they've rotated the squad a little bit. They've given opportunities to a few guys. They're now primed for the Wallabies, and the Wallabies are clearly on the back foot, heading there 8-hour travel day or so on the Sunday to get there and check into the hotel, etc. So I completely agree around the circuit breaker, the changes that will be necessary. I think Lukan Salakaia-Loto had a tiny little foot issue as well as the rib issue. So maybe you might see him come back. Clearly, Lenny Katau, that was a mistake leaving him out of the Italy test. I think Joe Schmidt, like Dave Rennie, thought they'd get away with it, and they didn't.
Well, there is an allegation, well, not an allegation, a report by one of our keen listeners out there that there was an agreement actually with Exeter.
So
I don't know what you've heard about this, whether that specifically Lenny Katau would not play that game against Italy.
Months ago, when this was all drawn out I think it was back in maybe April, I was always told that it would be 2 tests. However, speaking to sources over the last few weeks, the fact that he was going in for the Italy game, I think he could have played. So there was probably the expectation that they might not need him, and so therefore who just played the 2. And I think even on a pod maybe a month ago, I would have been saying that he's likely to only play the 2 test matches. So I think he could have played. Regardless, you've had he's a contracted player for RA for next year. Tom Hooper at the same club for Exeter, played on the weekend. He got through 80 minutes, didn't he?
Yep.
He
gave away the last penalty, not any fault of his own. It was his cleaners, but he was still out there, absolutely.
Indeed, but he was one of their better ones. He played, Ikitau didn't. I think at the end of the day, that was a selection blow. But what they do this weekend will be fascinating. We've spoken about the 10. I would be giving Ryan Lonergan a start. I think you need to trust him. The midfield, Ikitau to come back. I imagine it'll be Swali at 13, but I'll tell you what, I wouldn't mind seeing Paisami still at 12 with Ikitau at 13. Paisami actually, I think, has he might be ruled out. He's got a little niggle himself. So I'd have absolutely Peach come back in alongside Max Jorgensen, probably Callaway still at fullback. But this is where I come back to 6 weeks ago, why I might have entertained certainly a Dono or a Kurtley Beale is I think the experience, the voice was necessary.
Particularly after the loss of Tom Wright.
Off the back of Tom Wright, yeah. And I would have had a short-term approach going, you've actually still trying to target a top 6 finish here in the World Rugby rankings. Well, that's pretty much now up in smoke, isn't it? Unless they finish and
they'd have to win these final 2 games.
Yeah, and get some results go their way. If they did that, good luck to them. But that's not going to occur. Let's be frankly honest. So, yeah, I think tactically the Wallabies have been found out over the last month, and it's a shame to say.
Just going back to Lenny Katau, and I guess this new era of contract kind of short-term sabbaticals, there was always going to be a bit of push and pull, you felt, with this. And first year, I don't want to say it a feeling out period because you feel like it should have been, in black and white, this and that, and let's have an absolute agreement. But there's probably a lesson in that for Rugby Australia, okay, that if this is the way you see to lighten the load on your books a little bit, certainly for a short term, give players increasingly who want to go overseas and experience, playing in the Premiership or Japan or France or wherever else, that, okay, let's have these 9-month deals that Lenny Katau's on, or these 1+1 deals. And really, if that's the way forward, then they've got to absolutely tick all their boxes, whatever you wanted to say about it, and have it nailed down that we want these guys for these periods, and that is written into their contract clearly. There's not going to be this, you kind of agreed to this, we didn't agree to that. It has got to be in stone what these players, if it's under Reg 9, then they are available for all Reg 9 games.
Totally. And look, I actually don't think it's too far away from where it's been. Like the Will Skelton situations, it was a bit unfortunate that they were playing on the weekend, and whether or not he's fit for this next test, I think he's going in, but whether or not he's fit remains to be seen. But if they were playing Toulon, weren't they? They got hammered too, so it's a shame for them. But the Ikitau Hooper, I think they were pretty across what was going to go on there. I just think that the lack of clarity, though, doesn't help from, Peter Horn should come out. And what New Zealand's done quite well recently is they've been crystal clear with their injury list, haven't they? They've come out and they're not hiding behind a veil of secrecy here. They're saying X person's likely to come back in a month. They have on a Monday or a Tuesday, Scott Robinson fronts the media and says, said person is fit or not. The Wallabies are dancing around all those sorts of issues at the moment. So I come back to communication. Like you're wanting the clarity around Reg 9. Like Joe Schmidt, on one hand, has said that we like players coming in for a week, get them up to speed. Well, we didn't really need that with Len Ikitau, and Tom Hooper's come straight back in anyway. So I think they have the narrative that they want, and they can spin the narrative and shape it however they want, which is what Michael Checker used to do with picking guys from overseas or bringing them back on money. Like coaches will do what they want to do.
Well, they're not doing too well at the moment, Australia, that's for sure.
What do you think about Swali? Before we get on, like, where's Swali in all this? Because we touched upon it not long ago. He's not really making the impression that people would have hoped for. He's at 13. It's a very structured position. It was one of the reasons why Flower, the experiment there, didn't last that long, because they found that he was much more dominant at 15 and could pick and choose his timing. Schmidt last week was asked about it. He was asked around defensively, the soaking passive nature there. Once again, not really actually giving many answers around it. But with Swali, he said, look, he did go on the backfield once. He got beaten in the air there. We're pretty happy with how he's going there at 13. And it didn't look like he's going to plan to play him at 15 anytime soon. But has Rugby Australia and the Wallabies got that wrong around where his position is best suited to?
Well, he's certainly playing in a lot of traffic at the moment. It seems every time he gets the ball, he's getting swamped by defenders. And, on occasion, he is shedding a couple of them just through his, physical abilities, athleticism. But they're just not creating any space for him, Christy. And if that's, your $1.6 million man, your attacking asset, then you've got to absolutely question, what else can we do to bring him into the game a little bit more? How many games did he play at fullback for the Waratahs in the end?
The vast majority.
Certainly. And what was that? Missed, 2-3 at the start and the last 4. So conservatively 7 or 8 of the 14-game season. It's no rugby at fullback. I mean, that's a decent chunk. He had his moments there, and we know that Super Rugby is a different game to Test Rugby, but it felt like he was chiming in wider in more open space than what he is getting at Test level. And I'll come back to the fact that, defenses are going to be tighter and the game is different to that at the top level. But look, we set a circuit breaker. Maybe this is the week. You throw him in at fullback and see what happens, because clearly at the moment he's getting the ball in a lot of traffic and he's able to do very little with it, despite, stepping through an odd couple of defenders or powering his way through with his body. So, look, I think it's a fair question. We spoke last week around he was looking at a bit, certainly he's one player who probably could potentially lean on fatigue. I know you referenced the fact that he did have those 2 breaks during Super Rugby, but he's still training and mentally switched on, I guess, throughout that whole time since, playing a full season with the Roosters last year. So he has been going for a long while, and I do give him the benefit of the doubt on that front. But, Ikitau, maybe shift him back to 13 this week. Who plays 12 if Paisami's got that niggle? You've got, Hamish Stewart really is the only other option in there. Could you throw Dylan Peach in there? I'm spitballing here and just say, Dylan, just truck it up for us here at 12. Get us going forward. Because if we come back to it, what we saw on the weekend, they're just not getting enough go forward, and the disconnect between the ball carrier and their cleaners on the weekend was basically the reason why they lost that game.
Yeah, I think you'll say an Ikitau. If Paisami's not fit, you'd have Ikitau go there. Josh Flew can play 13 comfortably, and Filippo Ngunu's also been used in that
another
crash
option
ball nature off the bench at 12, but never really done that for the Reds. And that we've bemoaned a little bit, and there's quite a few like the selection conundrum right across the board. I think is obvious, but the 10s have copped flack for a long time. Tane Edmonds had copped flack for a long time. Like when Carter Gordon left the field on the weekend, they were up 19-12, weren't they? So then they concede a couple of quick tries. I don't think it's really a 10 issue either, because it was discipline.
They're an easy scapegoat.
It's an easy scapegoat. So I don't think it's the 10 issue there on the weekend. But that Schmidt, and I've been told this by multiple people, does not like his 10s breaking ruck, doesn't like them demanding the ball, spreading it wide, cross-field kicks. It's all about keeping it tight. I come back to the fact that I don't think it's an area of Australia's strength. And if we even dig a little bit deeper around a couple of wins that they've had against the Lions and the Box. Against the Lions, it was against a side that had been on the piss for 3 days. And then against the Box, they were 22-0 up, South Africa, and then they switched off. But there was 2 intercept tries there. There was an audacious ball from from O'Connor to Max Jorgensen that was very well taken. They were opportunistic tries. They weren't really set up by the attack there, of which Joe Schmidt is running. So, yeah, tactically, I think, circuit breaker, whatever it is, I don't know if they necessarily help because of the rigid game plan, the narrow game plan that's been in operation for some time now.
Conversely, you think about a guy like Les Kiss who will come in and take over the job in the middle of next year after the Nations Championship or whatever those tests turn out to be. He does like to move the ball. We've seen it, in the 2 years at the Reds that he's been back there at Ballymore. So, look, maybe that's the longer-term circuit breaker, if you like, and we fully expect there will be, changes there around players who have been Joe Schmidt players who might not be Les Kiss players, as much as they do kind of fall in line and talk from the same in-book as they approach rugby, that their styles are, quite different, at least what we've seen so far from the Reds. So, but that's looking a little bit further down the track.
Okay, but they're 5 from 13 for the year, and across the board, I think it's 11 from 26. So,
yep.
but 5 from 13 is 42% or so, and if they lose the next two, it'd be, and they're heavy outsiders, $5.70 outsiders against Ireland this weekend. If they lose the next two, they'll be 33% for the year, which is obviously terrible. But is there a case now, an increasing case, to go, appreciate what you've done here, but you are actually leaving. You're already halfway out the door. What's the real advantage to keeping Joe Schmidt on?
You think come out of Super Rugby, Les Kiss goes bang, straight away, start of July?
Well, I think you've got two coaches, like you've just said it, and I think it's pretty clear with how they played the games. The Reds were pretty open. The 10 was given a lot of freedom. They were playing on the run to this really rigid game plan. But what's the benefit of having Joe Schmidt coach one way and a tactics one way when Les Kiss is going to be coaching probably differently? Like, he might narrow it up a little bit come the test footy, but yeah, what's the real benefit of having Schmidt coach? And he's not going to be doing much hands-on coaching, but for the first 6-7 months of next year.
It's a fair question. Obviously, Rugby Australia, in their wisdom, saying that those 3 tests needed to be the last of the Joe Schmidt era, giving Les, I guess, an opportunity to finish up with the Reds, no matter how deep they go. And, we're all hoping the Reds go deep in the next season. But coaches have done it previously, haven't they? They've gone from Super Rugby into Test Rugby. So,
seemed like a lot of planning with the guys that aren't even around anymore. Like the Microns, I know that he's still doing a little bit in the background. Good on him. You draw on that expertise for sure. If Joe Schmidt does stay around in some capacity, then perhaps I can see the logic there. But at the moment, we're still not certain if that's to occur. What's Laurie Fisher going to be doing? Is he sticking around? My hunch is that he probably won't, and that Les Kiss will have a very different coaching structure. So, seems like a lot of planning for when you're having two guys coaching quite differently.
Indeed. All right, mate. I think that's probably enough of Udine for a week, and we'll say see you later to that game. And
I want to say a little shout out though, Zane Nongal. I thought he did a good job off the bench.
Oh, yeah.
And
I'd love to see a little bit more fight on the carry though.
Yeah.
But I agree. I think it was his best game.
We saw a couple of times where he got over the gain line there. I agree. You do want a little bit more post-contact drive meters, but I thought he did a pretty good job there. The scrum and the line-out's been pretty good on the whole, right the way through, and including in the last couple of weeks. So they're a couple of the positives. Maybe Angus Bell might be missing. He came off, looked like a shoulder injury, and you saw Aiden Ross warming up before halftime. He obviously replaced him at halftime, so maybe a Tom Robinson comes back too. So that's a big blow if you lose Belly, but we're presuming that Alan Alatoa does come back. So, yeah, fair play to him, Hooper, Mick Wright. There were a couple of positives in and amongst a pretty individual game from quite a few of the backs who got isolated, and we've already touched upon the rest. But I think it's probably fair to highlight a couple of the positives.
There were some.
And that ball from Carter Gordon is as good a ball as you've seen.
That's why, they want him back in rugby and being as close to the man. Clearly there's a goal kicking issue there that's got to be sorted out. I don't know how we solve that. We mentioned Suoli. I thought maybe that might have been. I didn't know Andrew Kellaway was actually a goal kicker. I can't remember him doing it for the Rebels. Maybe you can.
Maybe once. I've seen him practicing a bit, but barely ever done a professional kick. Like that was another reason I thought for a Swaley or a Gordon. Like, to be fair, Kellaway, he missed one, but yeah, he didn't have. A lot of goal kickers do miss one, don't they?
But you're right. That was a beautiful ball, straight on the chest of Corey Toole, and it was a nice break. And sad there just wasn't more of it. Maybe we'll see it.
Last point on Carter Gordon. Once again, another 10 playing in the backfield who did get exposed particularly in that first 20 minutes. He was exposed, Carter Gordon, somewhat in that Fiji defeat at the World Cup, where the one try that Fiji scored came off the back of Gordon dropping the ball. And was it Tuasova that scored in the corner?
Yep. It was just a miscommunication, really, wasn't it, between him and Marky Mark?
Yeah. But, he dropped 2 or 3, as we've already kind of discussed. Tane Edmund dropped a couple last week. I'll tell you one area where Ireland's going to be going after the Wallabies. It's pretty damn obvious, isn't it? Jamison Gibson-Park is the best kicking 9 in the world, and he'll be putting him up. So good luck, whoever's in the backfield.
Good luck. Will be revealed in terms of team selection Thursday night, Friday morning here in Australia. Keep an eye out for that on ESPN, of course, at the Raw as well, with Christie's takes there. All right, mate, let's talk about some of the action, the other action from the weekend. Some cracking games, as we suspected, both in Edinburgh and in Paris. Let's start in Paris. And probably the biggest talking point out of the weekend is that red cards can still be given, straight reds. We saw one, Angus Gardner, Australian ref, generally regarded, if not the best ref in the world, then probably number 2 or number 3. It was a bold decision. It was talked through well with the TMO and his assistants. I think probably Nika Amash-Kelly, your man, was trying to sway him one way there a little bit. The score was 32-17, an amazing fight back in the second half from the Springboks, down 14 men. France did go down to 10 for a deliberate knockdown at one point there, but Sia Khaleesi's 100th test. They were always going to be up for this one. They've got an amazing record against France at the Stade de France. I think it's 2 decades or something since they've lost there, or maybe it's in France, full stop, they were saying on commentary. But if we start with the Lud Jager red, how did you see it, mate? Were you happy to see that there was a referee still out there with the gumption to give a straight red and not the 20-minute? And I think it was probably a little bit of a wake-up call for the broader rugby community around, well, these still exist out there too.
I didn't think it was a red card. And I know that people were saying you can't have mitigation when you're always starting out in the illegal kind of framework where the arm wasn't being wrapped. I just think maybe it's a rugby incident. I don't know if it's quite a rugby incident here, but Lud Jager does not, that sort of tackle occurs 50 times a game, but generally speaking, they're both reasonably upright. Jager was pretty low, wasn't he?
Yeah.
So those sorts of tackles occur all the time. What we saw on the weekend was that Thomas Ramos, after being brought down from behind, lowered his body height by, I would hazard a guess, about 75 centimetres, maybe a metre. And that's the difference between getting someone either in the sternum or in the ribs to getting someone in the head. And Angus Gardner wasn't going to go a direct straight red, was he? And he got talked around by Nika, and I thought it was the wrong call. I just thought that the arms do probably start to wrap when if there's not the severe drop in height. So I like the idea that a referee will still go to a red card. I just don't think that was the right incident to show that.
I thought the the regular speed replay was going to save him there at the finish, because they took time to get that up. The TMO, not sure who it was, asked, do you want to see that at full speed?
Was it? I might have been wrong.
Do you want to see this at full speed? And when I saw that again, I thought, you know what? Yeah, maybe there is a case there that I would have been satisfied with a 20-minute red. I think a yellow off-field review upgrade. It was just that freeze frame, though, at the start, wasn't it? Where the shoulder was, the arm was kind of cocked back behind. He was launching into the tackle. I don't think there's any doubt about that. And this is where it gets difficult. Can you measure intent? And I think if you look at the slow motion replay, you say, you know what, straight red. As I said, the full speed, I thought, you know what, he may just be saved here with what was coming there from the assistants in particular around trying to talk Gus around. In the end, look, I think it's probably going to be a 4-week ban down to 3, and not knowing Lud's prize and whether he can still attend that wonderful tackle school.
Prestigious.
It is an interesting precedent, though, Christy, now going forward.
Certainly is. It's a much more complicated than the one that was given the upgraded red to Tugburn a week earlier. That was just obviously not
That got rescinded eventually.
It did, didn't it? I agree. I don't think this one will be. I put it out there at the time that on social media, and you've got it divided the community, this one, I think. And obviously South Africans are pretty heavily in one camp, that I was too. And interestingly, Thomas Ramos, overnight, he said that he thought it was going to be a yellow. And okay. I think that says a little bit about it. You can't always take the player's word, because I think there is a bit of a brotherhood or a sisterhood in the women's game where, with the exception of Kelty, the US player, where I don't think she's got too many fans, I don't think you see that typically in the men's game. Like we saw Beauden Barrett come out heavily in support of Byrne, and that may well have actually helped the big Irishman get out of that one and be able to play in the game. So interesting, but yes, I think you're probably right, i.e. the ban coming. What a game.
It was cracker. That was just incident just before halftime, and you thought, righto, France, who were up at the time, had probably played the better rugby, I think, in that first half. Springboks seemed a little bit off, but then they just found another gear.
Well, they had played the better rugby, but South Africa had missed a couple of shots at goal as well, hadn't they? They weren't playing much rugby deliberately. They were trying to take shots early, and France, when they got the ball, looked dangerous, didn't they? It was interesting. The card happens a minute before halftime. Had it happened in the 30-minute mark, I don't think South Africa respond as well. The halftime, being able to catch your breath.
True. Good point. Yep.
Really allowed them to totally measure up around how do we go about this game of chess now? Because in the 20 minutes after halftime, they played no rugby again. It was kicking, slow. It was trying to, Pienaar did a great job there. And France had the opportunity to put South Africa away, and they didn't. And then I just thought from the 60-minute mark, wow, this is like they've come away with 3 points here. They've gone from a 14-13 lead to a 17-13 lead. It just didn't feel like enough. And it was great captaincy being showed, because rather than taking shots at goal, they were recognised we probably need a try here or two, given that we're down to 14 people. We've actually got to land a blow. How else are we going to do this? The power game, the maul game, the scrum game. It was superb rugby and a tactical masterclass from South Africa.
Brilliant try from Cobus Reinach in the first half as well. Reminded me of Ricky January back in about 2002, going back in a Tri-Nations game in New Zealand. Famous try from a number 9. Brilliant bit of play, chipped over the top. We saw Sasha Feinberg and Gomazulu come into it, shifted out after Mani Labok came on there, didn't he? What was that, sort of not too far into the second half? And look, South Africa just proving why they are the world's best team, and they've got strength in numbers, strength in depth. Any other team you would think going down to 14 men for that period of time and having, because it's probably it means more now than it has previously, because we are in a new era of when the 20-minute red card is around. It's such a seismic, oh my God, like, what are we going to do now? But for them, as you said, to measure up, get their game together, narrow things down, kick away, play tight, and then just explode over the top like they were the team that was playing up a man for 40-odd minutes, not France, was incredible.
Feinberg and Gomazulu shifting from 10 to 12. Like, he's done that. That's what happens at the Stormers previously, where you had Labok at 10 a lot of the time and Sasha at 12. Labok's now gone to Japan, so that won't be happening anymore. But really fascinating how that mix and how seamless it looked. And maybe it's the Tony Brown effect, but they were brilliant. They executed. They were faultless in that last 20, 30 minutes. But even the decision to take off Sia Khaleesi, like, it shows the leadership, but the trust within that squad. His 100th test, was it Rassie Erasmus' 50th test as head coach? Okay. Which surprises because he's been around for so long. But obviously it was Jacques Nienaber, who was the head coach technically for the
maybe a name only.
Yeah, exactly. But what they did there was so smart when they had Norke, who came on, the other second rower, who came on to replace Sia because they recognised that they needed the line out and the more strength, and you're not going to get that so much with Khaleesi, are you? And then, of course, having Esterhausen there, who can be a back row / midfield option, it was just impeccable what they did there. And fair play. Louis Ballery was incredible, I thought as well. Like, I know the yellow card was a big moment in the game there, and they scored 3 quick tries after that. But that first 60 minutes, won a couple of balls in the air.
Had no right to have won, yeah.
How have you won that? And isn't he just, there's some players that you would pay the price of an admission to go to see. He is absolutely one of them.
He may well be a nominee for World Rugby Player of the Year, which I imagine we'll see the nominees for probably next week ahead of the final test, and then that'll be sort of the Sunday or the Monday night.
Let's get in early. Who would be yours?
Oh, mate, good question. Was this one of the questions without notice, or is that one just coming out? I don't know. That you said off air. Let me think on it through the remainder of the pod. We haven't got long to go. Let's talk about New Zealand and Scotland beforehand. Look,
it's everything we expected. I don't think I expected the halftime score where it was 17-0.
17-0, yeah.
Like, blimey. That what we saw in the second half, I thought was what we were going to see for most of the game, and it was compelling. And once again, Scotland were in it up to their ears.
Yeah, 25-17 eventually, with New Zealand getting over the line with a Damien McKenzie incredible finish in the corner. If you haven't seen it, go and have a look. Kind of, what would you say, contorting his arm back over his body in the corner to get the ball down under pressure. Had no right to score the try whatsoever given his size, but he managed to do so, and then they added a penalty to finish it off. But yeah, Scotland had ample opportunities to win this one. I think I was looking before. There's great stats from Jamie Lyle, commentator / journalist, Scott.
Great
guy. Who put them out on social media around just the number of 22 entries that Scotland had compared to New Zealand and the points that they came away with as a result. New Zealand also had, 3 yellow cards had to overcome. Scotland, we said, in the lead up, weren't going to get a better opportunity to beat New Zealand, given the injuries and kind of the disruption in the All Blacks camp this year. And Scotland, fresh, good glorified training run against the US the week before. So everything was in Scotland's court, playing at home. It was a reasonable day in Edinburgh and the capital as well. Atmosphere, crowd behind them, and one that they'll just regret slipping. It was a great shot of Aussie-born Sione Tuipulotu in the frustration and anguish at full time, knowing that, the opportunity missed. They were held up a couple of times as well. Scotland weren't. They had, as I said, ample opportunity down, camped inside New Zealand's 22 to build the scoreboard pressure that really New Zealand did too easily when they got down, and another opportunity missed.
Moments, isn't it? And seldom do Scotland take the big moments against the big two, being being South Africa and New Zealand. And we've seen that at World Cups, and we've seen that again at home in Murrayfield. They needed to put them away, and they didn't. Damien McKenzie, that kick, that 50-22, followed by what he does just a couple of moments later to score. They're the games that win your test matches, and the big players stand up. He is just brilliant off the bench. I love watching him, and between having him and he's another guy that you pay to go see because of how spectacular he is. There's a tiny theme, and there was I think it was Brumby's Rugby or whatever his Twitter handle is, who said, what about the pressure of Fabian Galtey? They can't deliver in the big moments. And there's a bit about that, but and you could certainly say that about Gregor Townsend too. But the theme on the first week of these big nations playing, from Scotland to France to Ireland, is that they haven't measured up and they haven't taken their chances to put away teams, the Southern Hemisphere sides, in the first week. It often takes a little bit of time to get up and running, and that's why England was a big missed opportunity for the Wallabies. We've got to remember they were 10-7 up after 60 minutes or so, and they'd played pretty poorly, had England, and obviously Australia had played even worse. So, those three nations couldn't beat South Africa and New Zealand, and maybe that was their best of opportunity is still to come, maybe. And that's where the little bit of fear with Ireland coming up is now that they're 2-3 weeks back together up against a Wallaby side that's now going on the other side of the curve.
Okay. Some nominees. I would think that probably each of Artie Sevilla, Malcolm Marks may have done enough for the box. Probably a couple of other forwards there. Sasha Feinberg and Gomazula's got to be in the mix. I was just trying to think back through that Lions series from a Lions perspective around who really stood up and who commanded the series, if you like. And I don't know that anyone kind of did across all three test matches for the Lions in the end. You mentioned that they've been on the piss at the Coogee Pav for a couple of days, and that may have taken a toll here in Sydney as well as that incredible weather delay. But I'd be hard-pressed to find someone, maybe it is BLBRE on the wing, who had a cracking Six Nations. Did he break the try-scoring record?
He might have. I think I'm a toss-up between Billy and Sasha Feinberg and Gomazula. The two of them, what they're doing is pretty special at the moment, and they're both young guys, and it's awesome to see a couple of fresh faces really just hit the ground running. And yeah, the try records are just unbelievable of what they're doing. I think you're right. Malcolm Marks would be in the mix, and Artie Sevilla would be in the mix. And if there's anyone else that comes to mind,
Will Jordan, maybe his try scoring record. Has he done enough? I guess New Zealand have had their problems under the high ball. Look, I don't think he'd win it, but I wouldn't write him off for not being in there purely because of his amazing strike rate.
Yeah, you wouldn't argue that at all. So yeah, I reckon they're pretty close. Lenny Cattell has done a good job. He'd be maybe an Aussie that would be, if you're thinking about a top six.
Yeah.
Like Targ Byrne and Tom Curry were very good during the Lions series.
Yep.
Finn Russell can't be there. I'm sorry, he had one good game in the Lions series, and really it was just a handy 40 minutes. So yeah, there we go on that.
Cool, mate. Right. Anything else doing the rounds? Good story you had for the Raw last night about the newest edition, or the final edition of the final member, rather, of the Liner family on his way to Ballymore.
Yeah, Nico Liner. I think it's going to be announced imminently. But yeah, caught wind of that story at the end of the week, and blimey, the pedigree. It was a great photo on the weekend where you see Lewis, who's obviously just beaten the Wallabies, scored a try, shown nice footwork there. Tom Liner being there, Wallaby throughout the year. His old man, and now the youngest, Nico, who's a predominantly winger but can play fullback centre. Going to be landing in Brisbane before Christmas. So, yeah, he's going to follow in the footsteps of not just his old man, but his brother. And I think it's great. Like, it would have been a heck of a trifecta, and he still may go back to England. But imagine that, having three brothers all playing for three different nations. And rightly so, given that Nico was born in London. The other two boys were born in Italy. Their mother, Isabella, Wallaby father. It's an amazing story.
It is one to look out for. Maybe we'll be talking 2031 World Cup. We might see Nico in action.
We might even see them for the Reds or Benetton with this partnership that they've conjured up. I don't know in 2027, given it's a World Cup year, but maybe come 2028, maybe the three boys would be playing together. So that's one to think about, and wouldn't that be fantastic? The last question I wanted to hit you up with without notice is, we've spoken a lot about Joe Schmidt and around the selections, the tactics. Phil Ward, Peter Horn, how much responsibility? We haven't heard from them much over the last couple of months, have we? How much responsibility should they have around where the Wallabies are at the moment?
Well, I think it'd be nice to hear from Peter Horn. We put the request in for Phil Waugh earlier in the season. We were told he was too busy, and then he appeared on both the Hello Sport and Grade Cricketer podcasts, which not typical rugby podcast, Christy.
I don't mind that, to be honest. You got to spread the like. I would have liked him to be here, but I don't mind getting into different audiences and trying to tap untapped markets, particularly around a Lions series. I don't mind that.
A few layup questions there, though, you would have imagined. So it'd be nice, Phil. I'll put that out again. Come in and see us, mate. We're spitting distance here from Rugby Australia. So we might run that up a chain again. Look, Peter Horn, yeah, I think we probably need to, now that we know we're that much closer to where the changeover point, if you like, is there any thought to bringing that forward by a few weeks? Just what has been, I guess, the comms, because, you know, Joe's kind of talking a little bit around setting this team up for the future. Is that really, you know, your job at the moment, Joe? Surely it's winning test matches. So, look, I feel like there's a lot of uncertainty and a lack of clarity is the word, isn't it, around just what, you know, what do you want to tell Australia about? What are the goals of this team right now?
It's mixed messaging because 2 years ago, before Joe Schmidt was in the role, Phil Wall was saying the Wallabies have got to get back to targeting every test match, and they'd gone away from that. But over the last year, it's all been about setting things up for the World Cup, backing young 10s to come through. The end of the day is, Pina's 35 for South Africa, doing a great job for the Boks there, and they've got 3 guys there from a young Sasha Feinberg and Gomazulu to a 27, 28-year-old Marnie Lebok to a Andre Pollard who's in his 30s, and the Wallabies are doing everything they can to throw 30-year-olds out the side door. So, and they've been doing that.
Cobus Reinach, you made it, number 9.
Yes, right, yes, indeed. So, my mistake. And I just think, good. What you've said there is fair. What is the actual planning? Because at the moment, it looks like the top 6 is now certainly looks like it's gone. But there's other significant reasons around being in the top 6 on World Rugby rankings, and that's sponsorship, that's dollars, that's confidence, is driving the next generations and going, they are Wallaby because it's a winning, successful brand. And we're seeing that Super Rugby sides aren't winning, and the Wallabies clearly aren't with a 42% win record this year.
Well, we're seeing all these kids announced in these lineups weekly at under 16 and 19's age groups around that are playing both codes and have choices to make. And if your Wallabies team aren't winning, then do you really want to end up there? So, especially
when the Pacific Nations Cup just finished, wrapped up, there's 30,000 there just at Comback on the weekend. Great atmosphere. We saw that in New Zealand a week earlier. With the eligibility changes of what they've done for the Pacific Nations Cup from a rugby league perspective, it is actually making it more of a global, certainly an Oceania game, which is, to me, attractive. And I'm not even someone who's covering rugby league. So, they've got to get their ducks in order there.
Indeed. All right, mate. That feels like a wrap for this week. Good to see you. Glad you enjoyed Oasis. By all reports, they were brilliant. I certainly, as I said, my inbox was full of messages that I didn't really want to read as I was dealing with toddler tantrums all weekend. But, that's a wrap. We'll see you 7 days. Quick, a tip for the weekend.
Ireland by 10. I think the Wallabies will fire a couple of more shots. So this week they'll be stinging, and I think the returns of Ikitau will help.
And ultimately, that's what you want to see. I don't think there's a way for them to win it at this point in time either. So I'll join you on that. I'll say Ireland by 12, but want to see some Wallabies throw a couple of punches.
And fascinating that New Zealand are outsiders against England, $2 outsiders at the moment. You don't often see that a New Zealand side that's now got a bit of an unbeaten streak, they've managed to put a few together that are outsiders heading to Twickenham. But it was an amazing game back in 2022 where I think it was a draw in the end. Eddie Jones's penultimate game in charge. I think it'll be a cracker as well. That's one to watch.
Don't miss that one, and don't miss next week's pod. We'll be back. Maybe the penultimate pod for the year. Might be a couple more to go yet. See if Phil Wall might actually come and join us in the Schmidt House. Christy, until next week, mate. Cheers and enjoy the footy. Until then, bye.